Hello and welcome to the Growth Winners podcast. I am your host, Dennis Hennigan, and today is going to be a special interview. I'm super excited to have this guest on today. Just a quick little background. Our guest is a performance coach who is on a mission to support those who are dedicated to their own mission that inspires them. Like myself, he is a father and a husband. He has experience in the military, which, without giving any spoilers, is what was part of his influence with him to develop a passion around helping empower others. To all the wonderful people out there, I'd like you to meet Nash Mackey. Nash, welcome to the Growth Winners podcast, and go ahead and say hello.
Dennis, it's such a thrill to be on here with you, man. I'm so glad our paths have crossed, and I see we've got so much in common already from our little jam session we just had prior to record. So I'm excited to get in this, man.
Yep, absolutely. Between the notes that he put together, we're going to dive a lot into building a great daily routine. I've got a lot of questions that I'm super pumped up to ask him. I've got my notes right here that I'm staring at. They're going to be talking about some obstacles that he's overcome. With him being a performance coach, we kind of have, you guys listening right now have a great advantage to actually take this in and apply it to your life because you're getting great quality advice right now from an awesome person and a great performance coach in itself. Speaking of which, before we go any further, I'll leave links below. You'll be able to click and go to a couple links, which will be his email, his website, and his social media accounts. But if you ever want to connect with Nash, especially highly recommend following him on Instagram at I am Nash Mackey. He's always posting great videos and pictures and all kinds of stuff on his story and feed. I've been following him for probably maybe 2-3, maybe a month now. And it's always nice seeing his stuff come through the news feed. And I'm not just saying that either. As always, I do a Growth Winners mantra. If this is your first time listening, you're just going to repeat 3 things. With having a special guest, I always love doing this because we get to bounce back and forth. So without further ado, repeat after me. I am confident.
I am valuable.
I am a growth winner. Okay, so I love when I have guests starting off with, and I ask this to people, if I were to pass them on the street sometimes. Like, I love asking anybody that I come across. I love asking this question. Describe yourself in one word.
Relentless.
Relentless. Gotcha. I love it. Is there a backstory on Relentless? Did you have an experience that makes that's why it's such an interesting question? Because someone in the past had said love, another one said happy. So I love hearing the backstory on what people really, if you were a product on a shelf, what's the one thing that describes you? What's Relentless come from?
Well, growing up, my mum always used to say I was like a bull at a gate, like a bull running at a gate. I would just go at something all in or nothing. Like, I was in many ways, a lazy kid. But that was because I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a lot of learning difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a very academic family. I'm actually the middle child of 11 children. So
Wow.
5 older, 5 younger,
Wow.
5 brothers, 5 sisters. And a lot of my siblings were very academic as well. My dad was incredibly academic. So was my mum. And for the longest time, we were actually all homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, I really struggled. I had my younger siblings actually passing me in all the learning we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt stupid.
Right.
But occasionally I'd come across something I really enjoyed doing. So it was creating things in the garden. I used to make armor and swords and weapons. I used to want to do film directing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started making these different medieval props, if you want. And I would not sleep. Once I got a taste for that, I would not sleep. I would obsess over it. I'd read books. I would just dive into it on such a high level. And all of a sudden, if you looked at it, you would say that guy was actually really academic when it came to that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did there is I actually tapped into my values. So all throughout my life, I was kind of compensating for this feeling of not being necessarily overly academic.
Mm-hmm.
When I did find something, I would go all in. So my mum always used to say to me when she saw me do that on something, she's like, you're like a bull at a gate. And to this day, I have to work hard at things. I have been classed as dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
So I really need to go all in on something. So that means I have to choose what I do very carefully because it's very energy consuming for me to go all in on something, if that makes sense.
No, totally. That's incredible as well, by the way, because actually it's funny you brought that up. We kind of just opened up a can of worms that I didn't even intend on diving into, but learning about that is awesome. We have my oldest daughter's 5 and my youngest daughter's 3, and my wife and I have been discussing getting her homeschooled. What are your thoughts on that? As far as would you say it was a good thing, or would you have rather been in a public school? Like, how do you think that really laid the foundation for who you are today?
Well, all I can say is it's all I knew. So
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
it was just a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, coming from a big family, there was mum and dad were super occupied. Uh, there would have been pros going to school. There would have been cons going to school. Like both sides. Like you hear kids who used to go to school and they're like, "I wish I could be homeschooled." At the time, I wish I could have gone to school. That's
Mm-hmm.
how it was.
Gotcha.
One thing I'll say was that when I went to college, I got sent to college a year early. We call college, I think, yeah, your college is a bit different over there, but at 15, I went to college here. And my parents sent me to college because they could sense I was very frustrated at home. I was ready to get out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when they sent me to college, it was a huge adjustment because all of a sudden I was in this facility with 3,000 other kids. And so I had to find a way to fit in. But one thing I noticed was that I was always very good at being an outsider, as in it was sort of normal. Like kids would kind of joke, they're like, "Oh, you're the homeschooled boy, you're the homeschooled boy." But I was sort of cool with that. And as now that I'm a business owner and an entrepreneur, that difference is actually my greatest strength because I'm so used to being on the outside. It's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs who have been to school and they've been trying to fit in and conform to these those sort of things that happen in school, if you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
kind of struggle then having to kind of leave what's familiar and get on the outside and seem a little bit strange or a little bit quirky as they go after this dream or, business that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make sense for other people, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing. My parents, I've just got the utmost admiration for what they did. We've chosen to send our son to school because for me, I just can't say that I have all the skills necessary that I'd like him to learn
Mm-hmm.
to get ahead in life. I can offer him some things, but I would be arrogant if I said I had all the answers. My dad was a teacher, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad, had master's degrees and all this other stuff. So, like, we learned Hebrew, Greek, Latin. We did the whole works growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But I most certainly don't have those abilities. So, for me, yeah, our kids are going to school at this point in time.
Gotcha. Would you say that has influenced? Well, I guess the better question is, do you think that is part of the influence of your dad being a teacher? Do you think they were so strict as in relations to academic because of that? Like, is that the core reason why you think they were so strict? And how did that play a role with you with the pressure at a young age as well? The high demand to succeed in academics with you such as yourself, not strong in that area. How did that play a role back then and leading up to today?
Yeah, well, I believe that everyone at every point of their life are doing the best they know.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents, I honor them. And I've told my parents I'm so proud of them for everything they've done because they were literally doing the best they know. The one thing you can guarantee people will always do, Dennis, is that they are always going to live true to their highest values. My parents have a high value on academics, and I honor them for being consistent with that.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. I can't expect them to know me. Like, again, they've got 11 kids. And for the most part, the academic exposure they gave us allowed us, like, for example, my dad used to really obsess about Latin, which is, people used to say, "Oh, it's a dead language." But my dad also knew that Latin is actually the root of most languages. Most languages stem from Latin. So he's like, if I teach you Latin, every language you learn from here will be kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
Or you will kind of be able to relate it back to Latin. So they were doing the best they knew, and they did an incredible job. Like anyone, they've got things they could have done better. There's things they excelled at. the things they could have done better is now my opportunity as a parent to step into.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I said I've got a very kind of obviously a growth mindset around this stuff as well. Like I know people are doing the best they can at the time. And sure, for me, there was a lot of pressure. One thing that happened when I was a kid, this might be interesting for your listeners, was that because there was such a big family, I didn't feel that, and because mum and dad were always looking after the new babies, at one stage in my life, I developed this tremendous rash over my legs, and it literally spread from almost my kneecap up to my belly button. And I did not tell a soul. And I suffered with this for almost 2 years. And I had it hidden, and I literally could not go to the beach or in water because of the excruciating pain. Like it would weep and bleed, and I'd actually get talcum powder or baby powder, we call it here. And I'd get it, I'd fill a little cup with it every night and sneak it into my bedroom and literally smear it into this wound, hoping that it would kind of seal it. I know this sounds pretty graphic, but this is literally what I lived with for 2 years. This was about, must have been 12, 13. And I didn't tell a soul. And this powder used to spread all over our room. And my big brother was like, "What's this powder everywhere?" And I remember going to the beach and all my siblings were in the water, and I was just sitting there in my full jeans on these hot days, jackets on, and I would just live like this, and I wouldn't tell a soul, and people just looked at me thinking I was a weirdo. But I was suffering with that. So the one thing that happened was that I guess I didn't feel like I didn't want to be a burden in many ways, because I had the little kids. They had so much going on, and I could sense that. And for some reason, somewhere along the line, I picked up that maybe my problem's not interesting enough, or maybe I don't deserve their attention. Maybe there was some belief there. I'm guessing there was. And the way that came about healing was one day Dad took me to the doctors because I had my throat was this big because I had swollen tonsils. And the doctor was checking my glands, and he went to check them in my groin, and he sort of pulled up my top, and I ripped it down. He's like, "What is that?" Because it was just this, man, you would not believe it. It looked like it was unreal. And it was kind of don't want to get too graphic, but it was just the paste of the talcum powder into my skin that had kind of turned into an infection. And the doctor was just mortified. And my dad saw it, and he's like, "Whoa!" He's like, "What is that?"
That was the first time that they found out.
And I remember walking back from the doctors. He's like, "You should have just told me. You should have told me."
Right. I had a question. What do you think? Why do you feel you couldn't open up? Why do you think you couldn't tell somebody about that? What was holding you back from that?
Well, again, it was that whole thing of just not wanting to be an inconvenience at the time, thinking that for some reason I was putting myself down. I was thinking that this isn't worth their attention. I can deal with this. I can deal with this by myself. And I guess that's kind of a lot of, I don't know, to kind of stereotype anyone here, but men in particular tend to do that a bit. I had a lot of people in my life who were very strong, like my brother-in-laws who I looked up to a lot were very strong, like MMA fighters, weightlifters. And I got into that at a very young age as well. And so I guess I had that mentality of, I don't want to be weak. I don't want to show pain, all this stuff. But man, inside I was suffering. It actually got so bad at one point that I remember we were on a ship going interstate, and my family were asleep in the cabins. I had to escape out of the cabins because I'll be scratching at this thing all night, man. It was crazy. I had to go into the public toilets on the ship, and I was literally in the cubicle crying my eyes out because I had this tearing at my legs. I walked up to the top of the ship at the middle of the night. We were going across, it's called Bass Strait here. And I looked over the rails. I was like, I'm going to throw myself in there. It would be easier to be in that water than it is to live with this.
Wow.
And I ultimately thought I could just see the waves crashing up the side of the boat. And I was holding on the cold rail, and I was like, it would be the easiest thing to be in that water. It would be the easiest thing. This cannot be my life. But then in that moment, I remember no sooner had I had that thought, then I got the other, just thank goodness, I got the realization that how would my family, I just had this image of my family waking up the following morning when they were going off, because we were going on a holiday. And I just pictured them waking up and knowing that that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness I caught myself out that how selfish that would have been of me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was so real at the time. And when people now, I talk to people who have had near suicidal experiences, I hear some people bagging them out and saying they're so selfish and all this stuff, but I know how real it is. On that edge, it is so real because the pain can get so much, and no one wants to be there. No one wants to be at that edge, but sometimes life just compounds to the point where you can feel like that. But what I say now is thank God I did not.
Mm-hmm.
Had I given into that then, I wouldn't have ever heard, first of all, I wouldn't have met my amazing wife when I was 17, which is only a few short years later. I wouldn't have heard the first cries of my babies. I always say to people, Dennis, like when I worked in operating theatre between the 2 years, I heard a minimum of 200 new cries, like the first cries of babies coming down the hallways as they were, burst into the world via cesarean. And I remember every time I heard one of those cries, I'd be so grateful, just filled with gratitude. I was only like 19 at the time when I worked in theatre. But that was amazing. But when it's your own kid and you hear that first cry, man, there's nothing like it. You'd know.
Oh yeah. Yep. Definitely.
That first cry, dude. And had I given into that suffering at the time, I would not have got to experience it. So I also know that people who are on the edge, if they can just find the strength to continue, life gets magnificent on the other side. And the interesting was, not long after that event, I heard my brother actually mention that he had a particular rash. This was one of my older brothers. He had a particular rash as well. And he'd used his cream and cleared it up in a week. And I heard it.
Wow.
I heard it. I didn't say anything. I didn't say I have that too. I just heard this conversation. I got money from somewhere. I don't know where I got it. I probably stole it out of Dad's wallet. And I ran to the shop because my parents were very natural. They tried to do all the natural things, which is beautiful. But I needed something a bit more hard hitting for this. I went to the shop, got this steroid cream. A week later, the rash was literally gone.
Wow.
1 week.
Wow.
So
that's such a great lesson. If people that don't have, that rash relatable backstory, you can still even turn that into a life message of how much pain and suffering are you willing to go through versus just either facing your issues and problems head on and just taking care of what you need to. Like for me, and hearing your suicide attempt or just thoughts of it, I've got mine for sure. I think, and that's something I'm learning more and more every single day, of people are hiding from their problems. I'm guilty of it. I've just always thought that it's going to be easier this way, or, snap out of it. And you had mentioned, again, going right into, like, with us as males being the tough guy. You can't show pain. You can't show a sign of weakness, or people will say X, Y, and Z about you and you're not a real man and stuff. Like, that stuff messes with people's heads to where you really, truly don't know what to do, And I feel like it's so much bigger of a conversation to have. And people, to me, my advice on it, because I'm in the same exact boat, is I think people need to either A, surround themselves with other people that can relate to it, or B, truly don't hide from it one way or another. Because think about it. If you did that cream much earlier, you wouldn't have suffered for 2 years, 2+ years. If somebody, and that's why I said this can easily be applied to anything in life. If you're living a job, if you're working a job and you can't stand it and you spend 2 years, probably longer on average, people stay in jobs where they're not happy. And if they just would have taken that chance on something that they wanted earlier, had a thought or an idea, and if they would have just jumped on it earlier, like, that's the biggest thing for me, is people and myself just delaying and just listening to your own self-doubt and your own thoughts. And it's just crazy how much pain is involved in that can truly dictate a long period over time of your life. You think it's just something so small that you hold on to for a very long time, but the next thing you know, you wake up, and for yourself, 2 years with the leg issue. For other people, it could be 10 to 15 years in a marriage they didn't belong in. They should have gotten out a long time earlier. And it's such a bigger conversation that I don't think people talk enough about.
I'm going to piggyback off that because I literally helped a woman the other day who had been in a job that she didn't love for years in that exact situation.
Mm-hmm.
She was also very talented in another area, and she wanted to make an income from this particular talent. And she was getting opportunities to earn money doing this particular, like expressing this talent, sharing this talent with people. And she was in a babysitting job. And we literally had the conversation. It was the first call we did together. And by the end of that call, she'd made the decision that it was okay for her to leave that job, but all she needed was someone's permission.
Mm-hmm.
Like I basically sat down with her and I was like, okay, well, how much do you need to live? Can you get enough consistent work from the other job?
Mm-hmm.
And what was happening, it was just familiar. She had the story that, oh, if I leave this job, then I will inconvenience other people. And what I pointed out to her was that if you are at a job that's not inspiring to you and you are doing it from a place of desperation that you just need to do it, you're probably not serving anyone, including yourself. The customers who come in can sense that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone picks up on that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And this lady in particular was working at a daycare center for looking after children. And those children need someone who's present, who's passionate about the job. And this lady thought if she left the job, she would inconvenience everyone. And I said, you will make space for someone else who's passionate about that to take over.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, yeah, you're absolutely right, because what happens is we just go further into the pattern. The longer you leave it, the further into the pattern. Like the better you get at doing it. And here's the bigger thing is you get addicted to the chemicals you release the most. If you're getting your fix of chemicals through a particular behavior, you're going to keep doing that because that's where you've always got those chemicals from.
Mm-hmm.
Your body is just a pattern recognizing machine.
Yep.
Whatever you do consistently, it's just going to make it easier for you to do it next time. So it's so important constantly to be growing and checking in with yourself and saying, is what I'm doing actually what I need to be doing to create the life I really want?
Mm-hmm. And before we had started recording, we were having that conversation. I just was telling you the same thing or something very similar, where growing up where I'm from, it's a small town, small population. So just almost everybody knows everybody. And, like I told you, for me with my backstory is I didn't even know what was possible. I grew up in a small town, played Friday night football and played baseball and had a pretty fun, high school experience. Didn't have a plan or a thing outside of high school. I didn't have a path. I dabbled around with a year of college. I dabbled around with working full time, got involved with the business that we still own today. And it's like, I don't want to say lost. It's just all that I knew. I didn't know what else was out there. I didn't know that, it's not that I didn't know it. I just had I didn't think it was for me, so to speak. I didn't think that that's something that I could do. There was no limitless possibility, in my mind. What was going on in my mind in my probably late teens was just grow a business, you do what you love, work hard at it, earn what you deserve, and life will turn out pretty okay. Like life will be good. And I was so comfortable. I was always motivated. I was always hustling and grinding and keep being burnt out. And if business is busy, then business is good. And I just kept spinning and spiraling. And so with my background, it's like I can totally resonate with that message of just not really knowing what's even possible. So we put so much pressure on ourselves to be more and do more and just take that chance and break through the fear. We'll break through the fear to what? I feel like the first step is the self-awareness of people just finding what actually sets their soul on fire, and then they can, take the actionable steps to get there. But I feel like people don't even give themselves a chance right out of the gates. At least I can speak for myself,
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree with that, Dennis. Yeah, and it's thank goodness for people that you were willing to step into that and recognize that, because you're here, you're producing something that's impactful for people, and that's the opportunity everyone has on the other side of stepping into that. First of all, just expanding your mind to new possibilities. Like, and again, you're doing that through this show. That's huge. And unfortunately, we're not taught that we need to do that. And I say need very deliberately. We absolutely, the brain needs to be nourished. The brain needs to be cultivated. The brain needs to be fueled constantly every single day. It's no different to a muscle. You've got to train it. You've got to develop it.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you do that, the more you develop it on purpose, as I like to say, in a way that's actually leading you to where you want to go, that greater future. Because it's not about, and I see a lot of young people doing this now with information, they're just overloading themselves with information. It is not about that. It's about learning on purpose. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to go? What skills, knowledge do you need to develop to actually allow you to get there faster? Learn that information specifically for that. Stick
mm-hmm.
within your niche.
Mm-hmm.
Stick within your niche. You can have listened to podcasts or have conversations with people who have different experiences, for sure. So you kind of broaden your horizons. But for the majority of it, you need to be staying within your own lane, learning information that's going to move the dial for you, at least to a point where you're sustaining yourself, hopefully earning an income doing work you love, mm-hmm. or loving the work you do.
Right.
One of two options there.
I can attest to that for sure. Because I told you, it's like with my backstory of, we own the event rental company, and I'm just now dabbling into trying to find my space in the self-development world and helping others, because I do truly believe that I don't like to classify myself as some extraordinary, unique, type of human being. What I've started to discover just in a short couple months of launching a podcast is just listening to feedback, listening to people that have texted me over it, sent me some messages on Instagram, is when I post a couple of messages that come across to the audience is when they can actually relate. And the more I keep getting messages, I mean, it's not like I'm, can't even keep up with my inbox. It's not like that. But when I do get these messages, what I'm discovering is that I'm not unique. Now, everybody's unique, but I'm not different. Everybody has their own challenges that they're experiencing. The only difference is the more of people that you and I, that can bring it into fruition, where they can really, truly, like you had said about the lady with getting permission. If people can just listen to this and it gives them that one spark, that one tiny little push to just say, you know what, I'm in. You know what, I just needed to hear that. That stuck with me. I resonated with it. And now I'm going to go do it. Like that now has been my ultimate, just mission to get more people kind of in the same boat as myself, of just experience, explore, find something you want. You mentioned the consistency of it, which I love that. And speaking of self-development, so to speak, with mindset and daily habits, which is what this entire podcast is all about. I love habits, talking about habits, and I love learning from other people with their habits. It's kind of like if you were in a book club, you're reading a book, they're reading a book, you want to talk about the different books. I would love to hear your habits. I can totally give you some of mine, but I have a precise. Now, back in the day, I didn't have habits. I woke up, went to work, ran the business, did my job, did my responsibilities, checked out, came home, hung out with my, at the time, girlfriend. Kind of weird to say that because we're married now, but, hung out with her. Then we had children. Then that was the focus. And you just lived such an ordinary, stay in your lane, stay average type of lifestyle. Developing my own habits. I'd love to hear some of your most game-changing habits. Like, I know you probably have just as many as I do, but what are some of that stay at the top? What have been the most monumental for you, so to speak, game-changing?
Yeah, the biggest one's been waking up early. If you go back to on my Instagram, you'll see I've done periods of time where I've actually taken people on the journey of me waking up early as well. Some of them were graceful, some of them not so graceful. Sometimes I did my best to commit to posting a video every single day as I was on this journey, but
mm-hmm.
I didn't always succeed. Again, we've got young kids, so but one thing I do is I wake up early. I wake up very, the 3:45 a.m. challenge. That's what I used to do. And I did that for quite a long period of time. And I shared some videos on me doing it, but I've done that for a long time as well. Mm-hmm. Again, one thing I'll say to people around this, because a lot of people get excited by the idea of waking up early, which is amazing. Part of waking up early is become very efficient at sleeping. Mm-hmm. Because everything, when you sleep, that's the magic medicine. You need to have a deep sleep every single night. So if your sleep's jeopardized, don't force yourself to wake up earlier than you need to. Now, in saying that, most people are oversleeping and they're not sleeping right. So learning to wake up early was one of those cornerstone habits that when I put in my life, it caused me to become incredibly disciplined in all other areas of my life. When I made that commitment to waking up early, all of a sudden I had to look at things like, managing my energy throughout the day, because as you develop a new habit, it's literally, using parts of your brain you've never used before. You have to literally push your body to do things for a particular period of time until it becomes automatic. So it requires a lot of energy. So waking up early caused me to focus on the foods I was eating, how much caffeine I was having, my sleep times, how I'm actually sleeping, like the environment I'm actually falling asleep in, down to how much light's into it, down to my consistency around my times of going to sleep. Just went on and on and on. And the earlier I chose to wake up, the more disciplined I had to become. And the early morning things for me, again, coming from some time in the military, when I was doing my recruit course, one thing we'd do is every morning as the sun would rise, we'd be on our guns, just in position as the sun rose, as a sign of respect for fallen soldiers. And we'd do that every morning. And that, I was only 17 when I joined the military, and it was only the reserve army down here. But at the time I used to be heavily involved in it. So every course I could possibly get on, I was in, because I loved it. But it was such an interesting time for me, because I was developing so much into a man. And thank goodness that happened then, because I tend to have a very addictive personality. Again, it's that relentless thing that kind of, I like to compare it with a bulldog. Once I latch onto something, I'm on. So in the military, thanks to having that standard in my life, like I can say with my hand on my heart, I've never touched an illegal drug. I've touched coffee, caffeine. That's my weapon of choice. I love coffee. But yeah, never had an illegal drug in my life. I used to be an incredibly heavy drinker, between the military and then also going to the construction industry. I was drinking 12 beers a night.
Wow.
And it became normal for my wife to go and pick me up a carton of beer, which is 24 beers. And it was just like a thing. Like I'd come home and my wife had a carton of beer there on the bench for me. And it was just normal. It was just like, oh, thanks, honey. And she's like, I bought you a present. I was like, oh, cool, my drink. I'm just drinking. And then, sort of crept on. I'd go on holidays. I found I was, cracking open a beer at, 10 a.m., whatever, just having a beer. And I realized that I was going down a slide. I was going down somewhere. Now, previously to doing this, when I just joined the military, I did work experience in our local emergency department in the hospital. And one of the most standout memories was that we held down a young lady who had come in from an overdose. And this beautiful, young, attractive lady. And for some reason, she was at that point, she got to a point where she made that decision and she thought it was the right thing to do. And I saw this girl, and I remember back to my own experience, I remember looking at her and thinking, that could have been me. It could have been me. And I was holding this girl down as they administered charcoal to, absorb whatever was in her stomach. And I saw that, but then moving out of that, I kind of got complacent and I started developing these habits. But one day I kind of got to a point in my life and I looked at myself around when we had our first child. I looked at myself and I actually realized that I had developed so many habits around eating. I was overweight. I was just drinking myself into the ground. I just had toxic talk, my mouth was like a trash can.
Wow.
It was it was bad. And I felt miserable. I felt absolutely miserable. I had a good construction business going. Everyone, I used to get $50,000 jobs at once coming at me, just like multiple, I wouldn't even have to advertise. They were just flowing to me. And everyone would look at me, were like, wow, you're probably doing really well. But I was so freaking miserable. I was literally living this life because when I left the military, I just went into, I knew I wanted to do that. But when I left there, or when was thinking about leaving there when I met my wife, I went to other people and asked them what I should be doing. was like, what do you think I should be doing? What do you think I should be doing? Now, that's pretty normal for a young person to do, but within that, I actually gave my power away. No one ever said to me, what do you think you should be doing?
Right. Right.
No one ever
That's
said that.
huge.
Yeah,
That's
man. And
huge.
so, I never ended up in those earlier days. I found myself doing so much of what other people said I should be doing. And, getting construction was one of them. I am so grateful I did, because construction's been amazing for me. You can see I've even been doing some painting yesterday, building some cabinets with my little man downstairs. But, I'm so grateful for the skills and knowledge that's developed in the relationships. And that was an integral part of my journey. However, other people don't need to go on that. And so now what I do is I give people that permission.
Mm-hmm.
I ask them when they come to me and say, what do you think I should be doing? I'm like, what do you think you should be doing? There is an answer inside of you that you need to tap into. It's inside of you right now.
And you know what I think? What I think it is, again, back to the babysitting permission type of thing, tying it right into that. I agree. I think every one of us knows what we should be doing. We just need someone else to validate it. We need someone else we're starving and craving for that validation from the world that says, hey, it's going to be okay if you do that, because we don't trust ourselves. Like the natural instincts for us is like limiting beliefs. Well, what if? Those what ifs, man, they can hold somebody back for their entire life if they don't, come and come face to face with it. It's like, that's what the timing thing. If you just wait and wait and wait, you're never going to come face to face with it. It's like, if you can just get that message out there to everybody that you come across, to just like, I want to wear one shirt for the rest of my life that just says, Nike does it, just do it. Nike has nailed it with their marketing. Just do it, just do it. And I love that you had said you were just relying on outside forces to validate, what do you think I should be doing, or what should I be doing? How would you say that, what was their feedback on that when you did listen to them, or like, did you take their advice? Did you shut it out? Did you consider it, or did you choose a path of your own?
Well, for many years, I just listened to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Just
And genuinely did what, like, if someone were to say, I think you should hang it up in your business, like anything, like you actually acted on what they were saying, or you just kind of let it hold you back?
For a period. And I think I have no judgment on myself for doing that, because again, I was doing the best I knew at a time. And as a young man, I was listening to other men,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, okay, well, this is, but it was down to things like, oh, you don't have a very strong academic background, we suggest you get into this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was coming from that place. It was almost like a place of, they were doing the best they knew. But now I can look at that and I can say, well, I don't need to do that for other people. So they would say things like, I would suggest you do carpentry because you're not very good at maths, or you're not very good at, other things like languages, whatever else. And they were like, carpentry is very hands-on. And again, I'm so grateful they said that, because that was the path I needed to go down. However, within that was that thing of just no fulfillment. And it didn't matter how well I did. And I learned a lot of different skills in that time. No matter how much I learned, no matter how much I achieved, no matter how big the job was, it was just empty to me.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, but that was probably because I'd had that time in the military and working in hospitals. So yeah, I was in the military. Yeah, started at 16 and 11 months. The day I was legally allowed to be in, I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I progressed into, I used to work with an ambulance service as well, transporting elderly people. You were saying about regret before, man. I used to sit beside the elderly in the back of the ambulance and hold their hands and like talk to them quite often when we were taking them on their last journey to a nursing home where they would pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't always the case, but in many cases, some people were super fragile we were transporting. And you knew they had hours or days to live. And I would talk to these people as a young bloke, like I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And they would tell me about their life. They would say things to me. They're like, make sure you live fully, make sure you get out there and, just live a great life, have fun, have a great experience. And I remember looking in their eyes and just seeing their eyes fill with tears when they'd look out at the world around them. They'd just be, as we drive up the hospital ramp, their eyes would be looking out at the world, and you'd see their eyes welling up. They'd see families walking past. and, you know, people sitting at cafes and just chilling out. Some people racing to work with their briefcases, looking all stressed out. But I realized I would look at the world that they were looking out on the outside of the ambulance, and then I'd look back at them and I'd realize that their time was over. They had their time. Like, even right now that they're in that hospital, that ambulance bed, they probably wish that once more they could just go and sit at a cafe. Once more they could just go and walk across the street, for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm.
Or just when they look back and see that, you know, a young family skipping along with their kids, their time is over. That is, it's done. And so at a very young age, I got connected to that reality that we don't have forever, that one day we will not be able to do this. No matter how great the technology gets, as far as we know now, our life is, you know, finite. We're not here forever. Mm-hmm. And I see people walking around tiptoeing through life like they've got forever. They think that for some reason it's just always going to be this way. No, it's not. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. Your kids will never be this age. You'll never have this day again. Like, something could happen tomorrow and you can no longer walk to the shop. Mm-hmm. Like, we take life so for granted. And
that's
that frustrates
incredibly powerful, man. That's incredible.
I almost feel like welling up when I talk about it. It's like, I feel so passionate about this. And I see people living these complacent lives, not because they want to. No one wants to, man. It's just that we're following a society that doesn't actually teach us to go out and pursue the things we love. It's weird. It's considered weird in many cases to go and say, you should be doing work you love. We've still got that conditioning where it's just like, no, you just got to go and earn a good wage and go and, you know, buy the house and tick all the boxes and have the car. Man, like, that stuff, that was good, and that was necessary for people at a particular time in history to establish themselves. But now it's something bigger. Now we need to actually evolve and stand on, like, do something bigger. And I believe the greatest gift we can give the world and give ourselves is just tapping into what's in here, like we spoke about, finding what's inside us, just writing it down as best we can, not getting pedantic about it, just writing it down, defining it on a piece of paper. What does it look like? What would a better life look like for you? Just write the freaking thing down. And then ask yourself, okay, what can I start doing today to step into that? Like, is my kitchen in line with achieving that? Is the food in my cupboard in line with achieving that? If I say I want this health, go to your cupboard, throw anything in the bin that's not in line with that destination. For real. Like, this is true. You don't have forever. The clock is ticking. And I hope this is your wake-up call. If you've been sitting on the fence for something, let this be a wake-up call. Make today the day you draw a line in the sand and say, I'm stepping out of the side. Because life is fragile. Life is too short to buy into the opinions of other people and just waste your time worrying about what other people think of you. The greatest gift you can give the world and the people around you and yourself is, again, stepping into what inspires you. And you do that because through that, you can have a greater impact. It's not just about yourself. It's not just about giving and getting, because you'll never succeed doing that. You need to be contributing something. You need to be adding value, but add value through doing work you love.
Absolutely amazing. Whoever's listening right now, Nash just gave you permission. Like that, I literally got chills. I'm wearing a sweatshirt. You can't see it. I just got chills because that's touching. It's amazing. And more people need to hear it. Two things on that for sure. I read this book one time because I want to get into the person that just heard that. They got pumped up there. And that's why I always do the mantra at the beginning. That's why I want people to really just somehow make it stick. Can I find a way to get the message out there where it's not just words and going in the ears and out? Is it going to stick? With people listening right now, there was a book I read, and I don't want to take anything away from you, but real quick, this book that I read was, and I want to tie it into people that listen to you right now. That's it. I'm going to draw a line in the sand. I'm going to go do it. And they stop because of that first wave of failure, that first wave of being told no, that first wave of rejection, anything, loss, not enough, whatever it is that's holding them back, even after they tried. This book I read one time, it was called The Gogiver, I think is what it was called. I'm not sure if you've read it before, but there was an artificial story in there about a woman who lost her job. I don't know the details because it was over a year ago when I read it. But the big takeaway from this story is that when she lost everything and she had to start over and start from scratch, she didn't know what she had to give. She was, I think, either about to get fired or something, to where she was like, it was her last chance at what she wanted to do. And she was saying, how can I compete? I have no credibility. I have no money. I have no this. I have no that. And it's those limiting beliefs that is what made other people resonate with what she was saying. And she realized the big takeaway is what she had to give when she didn't technically have anything to give somebody. And she was questioning herself, like, well, who am I? You know, everybody else is so much better than me. She had herself to give. That, I mean, I know it was a story in a book, but it's so true, you know. And when people feel, I'm guilty as well. I've felt that way before, where I'm not good enough, or what if, or, you know, when you start comparing, that's an immediate response straight to, you know, disappointment, so to speak. And that is going to hold a lot of people back. But yeah, I think a lot of people could be in that space right now in their life where it's like they do want to jump, they do want in, but they don't know how. You know, what would be your advice on let's just fast forward, somebody takes a chance, they start the business, they marry the girl, they do all those things that life brings us as joys, they take that chance. What's your best advice in the early stages to not give up early on? Because, I mean, if you go a year or 2 years or et cetera, maybe there's a time to really truly consider giving up if it's not working out long term. But what about like the first 3 months of trying something?
Well, you touched on this a bit earlier, Dennis, where you said that, you know, you're 25 years old and you've been doing particular things. You said for about 20 years, you know, we've been around society and all that. I would actually take it a step further. You've been taking in the world even before you were born. When we're in the womb, we are literally taking in the voices of the people outside, the tones, we're taking all that stuff in. Mm-hmm. So from, even as we're being developed in the womb. So we are being conditioned from the get-go, man. Mm-hmm. And I say to people now, especially between the ages of when we're born and about 7 years old, we are absorbing the world on such a high level. Our brain is literally like a vacuum cleaner, and it needs to be, because we need to find out how to fit in. Mm-hmm. In the days gone by, if you didn't fit in, you would die. Mm-hmm. If you weren't part of the herd, if you were different, they'd get rid of you. And an interesting thing, doves. Now, I believe this is correct information. This is what I've learned. So I've never researched this, but I have heard this, that apparently doves, even though they're considered the peaceful birds, apparently if one of the offspring are born slightly, you know, distorted or, you know, deformed, if you want to call it that, they will peck it to death. Mm-hmm. And
wow, that is interesting. That's very interesting.
And so we've got this thing inside of us. We want to fit in. We want to fit in. We don't want to be outcast to the society, because we know instinctually that we would die. We would not survive. Mm-hmm. The way we survive is we fit in. We just take in the world. We see what's working well. We listen to mum and dad and say, you know, they're like, be quiet, you know, don't do that, do this, whatever. And we're taking that in. We're absorbing the world between the ages of 1 and 7 mainly, just so we can find our footing and just survive. We're just focused on survival. Now that's fine, and we might get by, and we've got our meals, and we've kind of got a roof over our head and all that good stuff. But then there comes a point in life where you actually need to say to yourself, well, what do I want? Mm-hmm. Because I've survived, I've gone through school, I've done all this stuff. And you say, what do I want out of life? Because I'm not here just to mirror what other people do. I'm not here to just completely disregard that like I did with my parents. I honored them for the way they were. I honor them. They had benefits and drawbacks. So no different to me. There's some things I'm going to do really well. There's some things I'm going to suck at as a parent. I know that for a fact. Where I fall short, if my children decide to have children, they then get to pick up the baton and say, Dad was really, terrible at this. I'm going to improve on that. Mm-hmm. That's not an excuse for me never to try my best, but where I fall short, they will, fill that gap. Mm-hmm. That void will then become a value for them. And so, within that, we've all got that thing. We want to fit in. And we pick up, we're just like a vacuum cleaner, taking in the world. And some of that stuff we take in is not going to serve us. It's just inevitable, because this is the way I see it. So your parents did things a particular way. History's done things. Your teachers have told you certain things, and society knows so much up to this point. Now, what they've known isn't enough to get you further. So at one point in your life, you need to look at it and say, okay, this has been my experience so far. There's been goods and bads. This is where I want to go. Now, what do I need to start doing today differently to make sure that this sticks, to make sure I stick at this? What did I learn in the past that's not actually in line with the outcome I want? So for example, if you have, like you said, you're early in a marriage, for example, and your parents had a divorce, and you're like, oh, is my marriage going to last? Is my marriage going to last? Well, you need to look at that and say, okay, well, what did my parents do? What was the conversation? What's the story I've got around that? What do I believe to be true about relationships? And start exploring your beliefs, because the relationship won't fall apart by itself. It will fall apart as a consequence of you failing to do the little things that need to be done to maintain a great relationship. And so you need to catch yourself out and say, why would I not do those things? What's a story in my head that would actually stop me from going and doing those things? Would I believe that, I don't know, my partner should be doing everything for me? Do I believe they should just be giving me love, just like my parents did, and look how they ended up? Like, just check in with your story. So that would be the first thing. I'd say also have a very clear vision of where you want to go, because sometimes people, don't continue at something because they don't actually know what they're going after. There's nothing bigger than what's here right now. And sometimes we're all going to go through challenges in your relationship, be it your finances, be it whatever. You need a vision in all areas of your life, not just one vision for your career. I'm talking about all areas of your life. What's the thing bigger than the right now? Because the right now is amazing, but sometimes the right now can be pretty terrible as well, like as in pretty challenging. You need something bigger in all areas of your life, and it needs to be compelling enough for you to keep going, for you to keep growing. And having a vision in all areas of your life will actually discipline you to actually choose better things in the moment. So for example, you were saying about if it's right, if something's right, or if you're trying something for 2 years and it doesn't seem to be working. Well, yeah, absolutely. You need to check in with yourself. If it's really not working, then it shouldn't take 2 years to know that, is what I'm getting at. Like, you need to be tweaking, testing, and just improving constantly.
See, I think, it's great. I think it goes hand in hand with what we touched base on earlier, where if you try something brand new, it's change. It's different. Everything's different. When Facebook releases updates, the first thing you see is everything on your news feed of people saying, oh, I hate the update. Oh, the update's pretty cool. That's just a difference of two people adapting to a change. It's whether you are getting it or there's resistance to it. The one thing here is I want to switch to a day in the life. Like when we talked about daily habits and the things that have been the most impactful and game-changing for you, as far as the whole day, you said waking up early and taking care of your sleep is super important. But what about like a day in the life? Like, how do you manage your time? How do you, with purpose and stuff, like, do you have a strict schedule? Do you believe in routine, or do you believe in tackling what comes at you that day? Or do you have a set schedule every day?
I've got an extremely well-refined ritual I do every single day. This here, this is a guide all my one-on-one coaching clients get and work through. That's 3 months worth of accountability. Now, this has got included daily guides that you literally go and fill in, that I've put together over the years. I've been learning what I know now. The best questions, the best ways to schedule your day. I don't believe, like, success doesn't happen by accident, Dennis. Like, no accident. You don't just end up there by chance. It's like a beautiful garden. You can't just leave a plot of land out there and expect stuff to grow and flourish. It's just not going to happen. Stuff's just going to grow. It's going to get overrun, and it's just wishful thinking. You need to show up on purpose every single day. So when I work with people, and I do this myself, I literally feel that in every single day. It's including 3 tasks I'm going to accomplish the next day that are the most game-changing moves that will take my life to another level.
Mm-hmm.
If I do those things, I will be on another level tomorrow than I was today.
Mm-hmm.
I always think like that. I'm always like, what's the next level? What's the next level? What is it? No matter how good it was, what's the next mountaintop?
Mm-hmm.
As part of that, I'm also constantly checking in with myself. Just like I said, with those elderly people I saw, I realized that I might only get this opportunity once. And, again, coming from a medical background, I know how fragile life can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to live my life in such a way that I don't have regrets. And I know that can seem like a big thing, but I am committed just to doing the things, having the conversations, being present with people to a point where I wouldn't regret it if they passed away tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, with my hand to my heart, I honor them for their life. It was incredible to get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually where I want to live from, because I know it is a fact. Like, I've got 5 brothers and 5 sisters. Maybe I'll be the first to go, but maybe I'll have a heap of funerals to go to. I need to have a healthy perspective on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of it. We all going to have parents. It's like, how much can you set yourself up to win now?
Mm-hmm.
Because things are going to happen in life. You're just going to have things that change. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's like, okay, well, how can you be so strong inside yourself, so well established that no matter what happens, you become unshakable inside?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could lose this arm tomorrow. Knock on wood, it's not going to happen, but I can't be too attached to that. Like, what would that mean for me if that happened?
Right.
What would that could not affect this? So you want to develop yourself every single day, develop this core that cannot be broken. No one can take that from you.
Mm-hmm.
And develop it in such a way where you're always setting yourself up to win. And that means allowing for the potential things that the things that will happen in the future that could potentially derail you, and say, okay, well, how do I actually show up now to make the most of that? So, for example, like, I make sure that every single night I tell my kids how much I love them, what I appreciate about them. I tell them how much I enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
I love being your dad.
Yeah.
I like the most special thing for me. And I actually let them feel that, because I know if something happened to me tomorrow, I want them just to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't take it in. They'll be like, whatever, Dad, that's fine, long as I say it.
Right.
And if you just live like that, man, like, so I went a bit off track there, but that's how I'm focusing on living my day. So yes, I live very regimented. I've got a highly refined morning ritual I do, which includes exercise, meditation, journaling, learning, highest priority tasks, breathing exercises, hydration, taking supplements. Man, I live and breathe this stuff. I live and breathe it.
That's exciting. Yeah, the biggest game-changing thing for me was to break it up for my day. So if I got hooked on a project, I am so notorious for just going all in and like nonstop until kind of stubborn, where I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to do it. And I've been so burnt out in years past. It's not even funny, just because I wouldn't let go. Like you had said, leech, like I would latch on to whatever I was doing. Like if my goal for the day was to clean the whole house, whatever, you'll find me at 10 o'clock, like until the house is clean, and I will just burn up all my energy, run out of gas, and then I'm 2 miles from the gas station, so to speak, in life. What I've done, which has been game-changing, is to break those up with, I learned this from the High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, was setting transitions throughout the day. Like literally I have alarms on my phone. In previous episodes, I've showed them, so I'm not going to show them again, but I've got these silent alarms that when my phone goes off, it's at 10 o'clock, it's at 1:30, it's at 3:30, and it's at 6 o'clock. And there's different messages that I send myself every day. And those are my triggers that I can break. So every day around lunch, around noon here, I read, where before it's like I would just work on something and then I've done that, I will go work on something else. Instead, I've been nurturing the mind to take that break, like kind of like if you're running on the treadmill, and then instead of like, okay, I hit my mile for the day that I wanted to run, now let me just jump right into another mile, even though I'm already kind of like at a high level, jump off, regroup, get back on the treadmill. And that's what I've done with my mind throughout the day. That's why I always focus, I said it earlier, that's why I always focus internal. It's been the biggest game changer for me. I used to think about all the external things in life, and now it's where I'm able to just not really put so much value on those things, and to where I actually value things that I believe are in alignment with who I am as a person. That's where I've really made the biggest shifts in my life. So I just wanted to add to that before we wrap up.
Love it, man. I love it.
I cannot thank you enough. I learned a lot, actually, because when I have guests on, I get to learn from other people, and it's kind of like it's its own little session in itself, just to hear from you and hear your value, hear your stories. Everybody comes from different spaces. I appreciate you so much delivering so much value today. I always end, oh my gosh, I can hear the kids stomping upstairs. I always end on a challenge, and I actually typed out a challenge real quick. It's basically just kind of like I said earlier, I put on Instagram, I do a challenge. If you have a challenge that you want to challenge the audience, I definitely, because I make all my challenges when I'm by myself on the podcast, but if you have a challenge that you can brainstorm and share, we'll roll with that. But I do have one typed up. If you can't think of one on the spot, you just let me know.
Oh no, this is a good challenge for me. I like it. So I would say every single person listening to this, I challenge you just to sit down and write out your vision.
Mm-hmm.
Like just write something down. And
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of incredibly wealthy people. I'm blessed to say I've worked with some incredible mentors around the world. I've not traveled around the world, but I've worked for them virally, which is awesome. And some of these guys and girls, they have had like just enormous amounts of success in their own right. And quite often, the very first vision they ever cast was on the back of a Weet-Bix packet or a Wheaties packet, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you've got that in the States. Or a cereal box. They've torn open a cereal box, or on a serviette. They wrote out this first vision, just this thing that sparked something. Again, because as soon as you sit down and write out a vision, you immediately say to yourself subconsciously that there is something bigger than what you have right now available for you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people won't write down a vision because they've got, like you said with your friend with the audio, it was weird, it was uncomfortable, they'd never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's done that, he's probably going to start doing it for other people. He's like, This was so quick.
Yep.
He just expanded his mind to it. It's a new possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if people just gave themselves permission just to sit down and write out a vision for their life, and then just commit to reading it every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day. There's no end date with this. Just read it and read it and read it and read it, and start taking actions toward it every single day. And when you feel like it might need a tweak it. Your vision is not handcuffs. You can change your mind. Right. As you learn to grow, you'll find new things, but start with what you know, cast a vision.
Mm-hmm. That's a great challenge. You could be driving your car, so that could be the easiest way to just forget about this, turn it off, and then you didn't get to it because you got busy. Life ties you up. Write it down when you get a chance. If you're listening to this in the shower right now, kind of cool that you're listening to us in the shower, but get out and write it down. Just do it. Take action on the things that you want. And I love it, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect with me and sharing your message with the world, man. Thank you.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. It's been great. And thank you for putting the work in and all the effort that goes. I understand. I hold a podcast myself, and so I understand what goes into creating a podcast. And yeah, man, it's full respect for what you're doing. You're obviously a dad. You run a business. So, man, you're here showing up, adding value to people's lives. So I completely honor you for that.
I appreciate that, man. It's the process that I love. I love the learning experience, especially in the early stages. I almost forgot. Always end with the mantra. So you remember your line?
Yes.
I'm valuable. Yep. So everybody, we're going to wrap this up. Repeat it. Repeat these 3 things. Here we go. I am confident.
I'm valuable.
I am a growth winner. Thank you guys so much for listening.